kind, have
So
got
gentlemen,
added.
we are starting now. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Awfis Leadership Series. Thank you for joining us. Today's discussion is on a very pertinent topic that most commercial real estate leaders are mulling over right now. India Inc.'s return to the workplace, strategies for the new office. While the current situation is still very fluid, companies have started weighing in different options that work for their employees and for their organizational culture as a whole. While some have instated a long-term work from home policy, others are choosing hybrid work models that enable working remotely from home or from a workplace near home. Concepts like hub and spoke and core and flex have become common parlance for most CRE professionals. But what's left to be seen is whether the hybrid model will turn out to be efficient and sustainable for India Inc. in the long term. Today's webinar will be moderated by Mr. Amit Ramani, founder and CEO of Awfis. Amit comes with 2 decades of experience in areas of master planning, strategic planning, design management, workplace, and business process improvement. He has been spearheading Office evolution into a fully integrated workplace solution platform, which is especially equipped to work with enterprises in today's new reality of distributed workspaces. So without any further delay, let me begin by introducing our panelists for the session. It is my pleasure to introduce Shamsher Sindhu, Head of Real Estate Services, APAC MasterCard. Shamsher brings with him a wide-ranging experience across corporate real estate strategy, selection and transactions, design and build, facility management, and business continuity management. He is currently based out of Singapore, leading all APAC real estate decisions for MasterCard. Prior to MasterCard, he was heading CRE management for Kotak Mahindra Bank. Welcome to the panel, Shamsher. We look forward to an insightful discussion with you.
Thank you, Sumit. Thank you so much.
Next, we have Sameer Saxena, India Real Estate FM and travel leader Marsh and McLennan. Sameer comes with 25 years of experience managing complex business decisions. He has successfully executed transformation initiatives across global offices, focused to deliver cost efficiencies, process efficiencies, creating metrics, and an innovative work environment for the employees. A very warm welcome to the panel, Sameer. We're excited to hear from you.
Thank
Now,
you, Subir.
coming to our next panelist, Praveen Vasudeva, Country Head, India Global Real Estate and Facilities, SAP. Praveen has over 20 years of extensive experience in the areas of business planning and workplace strategies. In his career, he has successfully transformed work experience to flexible, scalable, and human-centric workplace solutions with technology deployment for operational effectiveness. Welcome aboard, Praveen. Look forward to your valuable insights on the topic.
Hi, everybody.
Up next, we have Neeraj Basotia, Group COO, Usha Martin Technologies. A business and technology-driven professional, Neeraj has global experience of 25 plus years in IT solutions and consulting business. He has worked with NIIT Group for 15 years in India, APAC, and Europe. Later, he moved to IBM and IBM UK to spearhead the BD in BFSI space. Neeraj joined Usha Martin in 2013 and has led various functions across the globe. Welcome, Neeraj. We are excited to have you on the panel.
Thank you so much, Sumit.
Last but not the least, we have Viral Desai, National Director, Office Transactions, Knight Frank India. Viral has been associated with Knight Frank for 14 years and comes with rich experience in the real estate domain, having handled complex transactions in leasing, pre-leased investments, and asset disposition. He shares excellent relationships with developers and occupiers across the country and advises them on their real estate portfolios. Welcome to the panel, Viral. We look forward to hearing your views.
Thank you, Sumit, for the introductions. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to the panel. We are in the midst of some of the biggest transformations of the decade that will forever redefine how work gets done in India Inc. While work from home did help business survive under the dire circumstances of the lockdown, there's a general fatigue that set in from a lack of social interactions that have significantly impacted the social cultures of various companies. This is causing organizations and employees to craft the return to office strategies that has put corporate real estate leaders at the center of this new problem statement. How will India Inc. return to the workplace and what are the strategies for the new office? I am thrilled to moderate this panel today, which comprises of seasoned and expert leaders in CRE space, and to discuss key strategies being adopted by India Inc. to make return to office efficient and sustainable. Let me begin with the first segment. How has work from home paved the path and gave way to organizations adopting hybrid work models? What was being proclaimed as a new normal doesn't seem to be long-term viable solution anymore. Just today, we had the Goldman Sachs CEO saying that it's an aberration, it's not the new normal. Employees across the world are looking for right balance between flexibility and collaboration. While work from home allowed for ample flexibility, the one thing that organizations and employees have missed most are the ideas inducing social interactions at the workplace. This, coupled with incompatibility of most Indian homes to support work from home, infrastructure leads us to carefully crafted workplace strategy called hybrid workplace model. Let me start with you, Samir. Samir, you've been part of global organizations like Marsh, Mercer, Genpact, leading the real estate strategy for almost 25 plus years. Due to the pandemic, the way we do business has been permanently affected with companies implementing remote work policies. Are hybrid office models the way to go forward for organizations globally?
Thank you, Amit. So I think the first one, it's a disclaimer. The views expressed here are solely representing me as an individual. I think that's the first thing that I would want to table first before we move ahead. So a brilliant question, and I think Amit, you said it right. This is one of the biggest change that we are looking at as far as this decade is concerned, right? This is another 9/11 for us as the real estate professionals. I always envisage it in this manner. I think the largest work from home experiment is done and dusted, and it's behind us. Now, what is needed is the new way of working with this paradigm shift. I think uh, the hybrid model, definitely we are going to see this kind of a model being adopted, and I'll say why. I would look at it from three different perspectives: from employee, employer, and environment perspective. So from an employer perspective, I think uh, there is a big plus as far as the productivity is concerned. They have been able to achieve those productivity levels which were achieved while they were working in the office. As far as the safety of the employees, I think they have demonstrated that they care for the employee, and that's why they've taken such stands of giving this flexibility to the employees. The third part is around wellness. I think this also will bring in a lot of focus around the wellness. So it is not only about ergonomics that you used to talk about, it is also about wellness. And last but not the least, it is coming. It's a blend of environment as well as the organizational commitment. I think there will be a more renewed focus on the sustainability part of it. As far as the individuals are concerned or the employees are concerned, I think they have been benefited by the employee first outlook. I think there's a huge flexibility that they have. There's a lot of convenience that they are now having to work in the way they want to work while they are there at home. And with this hybrid models, I think there is a big plus for them. Safety, the organizations have demonstrated safety, and so are the employees adopting to those measures. In terms of commitment, they are coming forward and displaying the commitment that they have for the organizations, for the client, uh, for themselves, and that reflects in the way the productivity has not been affected. So I think overall, if I look at the hybrid model, answers all aspect, whether it is related to employees, employer, or the environment, and it is pretty effective, efficient, and perhaps an ergonomic way also for us to adopt the future. So I think all these positives will lead us towards a belief, or this belief system gets stronger, that the new hybrid model is here to stay.
Thanks, Samir. Viral, you've been associated with the Knight Frank for 14 years, working very closely with occupiers, offering in-depth analysis of market conditions and trends. How, according to you, are companies readjusting to master the hybrid workplace model successfully?
So, let me answer this question, Amit, from a real estate standpoint, and all the other industry leaders will, answer this from an occupier standpoint. 1 year into the pandemic, and we are all in the process of kind of coping with it. We've sort of understood what it means, but we're still kind of coping with it. The way we see the situation is, if you broad base into three categories: um, evaluation, experimentation, and evolution. I think most organizations today are either in the evaluation or experimentation stage, and a final model will evolve over 12 to 18 months once we are through with this, or we've got more and understood more of this situation or pandemic or anything like it. From a real estate standpoint, I think pre-COVID, real estate decision making was hinged really on two parameters: growth and degrowth, leading to consolidation, expansion, relocation, etc. Today, in addition to the dimension of growth and degrowth, we are talking about work from home fully, partially. We are talking about social distancing, and of course, the uncertainty over business, plus the considerations of an employee-employer that Samir already mentioned. I think from a corporate standpoint, if you're looking to do your real estate planning and whichever model that you want to adopt, what you are looking to do today is to have a more flexible real estate portfolio, which will allow you to adopt to any model, which means shorter leases, capex light, and which you can be nimble to move into a direction, because clearly most organizations are in stage 1 and stage 2, as I explained, either in evaluation or experimentation stage, so that you are ready for the final evolution of the model that will come through on what will happen. And that would be my two bit on what model and where we stand. I think the market by itself is, demand was chasing supply pre-COVID over the last 10 years, commercial real estate. Now it's a more demand leaning market, tenant leaning market, and the flexibility will come at a cost of the landlord, which will allow corporates decision making to propel their decision making so that they can adopt to models which are and solutions like what you provide, which are capex light, which is managed offices. I think there is going to be a scope to that, but expansion leading to real estate space acquisition, I think that myth has been distorted, and a final model will evolve, whether it's a hybrid or what it may be.
That's great, Viral. Thank you for giving us a plug to the co-working boys here. So moving on to Praveen. Praveen, you've been with experience 20 years in the workplace strategies and diverse understanding of CRE, going to have experience with across APJ with Cisco. What, according to you, will be the key considerations for organizations while adopting the hybrid model, and what are the pros and cons for employees and employers?
Okay, hey, thanks, Amit. I mean, let's step back a bit, right, into pre-COVID eras and, probably 5 years back, right? I think the future of work has been evolving, or the workspace itself has been evolving over a period of time, right? And we were all treading in that direction with different spaces, different pace rather, for some years now. And I'm sure all of us were, are aware of the activity-based collaborative work environment and all that stuff. I think most of us are very clearly aware of where it was treading, right? And you will also, to a certain extent agree that, pandemic has accelerated this transformation, right? What we're talking about, the hybrid model, because, what didn't take place for years, took us just few months to transform in the way that we've at least started thinking, because the pace is, if you look at, the early 90s, 2000s, the work and the work environment is very different from what we are going to see in probably next few years, because as I mentioned, the pandemic has transformed a lot of things, right? The way we live, work, and play, right, has been unlike the other years, right? So accepting that we might not operate the same way as we were pre-COVID, right? Companies have realized this, and they're trying to adapt to the new changing conditions, which is really essential for all of them to be successful, right? So if you look at what fundamentally has changed, is the pandemic has accelerated a lot of digital transformation for the businesses, right? And the corporate industry is, is honestly in a state of flux, right? It's like facing a storm. A lot of us, don't know how to move and what actions that we need to take, because there's no data of how we move forward, right? Because this is something as we call the new normal, right? We've not used to this. So I see this as an opportunity, Yeah, an opportunity to reimagine the future of work is never been stronger than what it is today. And companies should really explore what solutions that fit their best business needs, right? So how do you establish a modern and an inclusive, flexible, whatever you call it, flexible, elastic environment that is truly built on trust and collaboration, right? Between the employees, organization, there should be a trust and collaboration that needs to really exist, because it's very different from what it was, right? It should be moving away from a workplace centric world to a work centric world, right? We were always talking about, when we talk about work, it was always about workplace, few years ago. Now it's not about workplace, it's about the work itself, right? So it's about how do you converge work, workforce, and workplace, right? This is this is more like, I would say, a liquid workforce with a flexibility to operate in the manner that they really want to, right? When, where, how, is an important part. And this is what is termed, a new coin termed as the hybrid model, right? Now coming back to your second point, Amit, right? You talked about pros and cons. I would rather refrain from talking pros and cons. I would just highlight this. Hey, how would the hybrid model actually enable, right? Enable what? How will it enable productivity and enable business disruption? How will it create flexibility and elasticity to corporate organizations like us, and similarly to the employees? How do you in fact, more importantly, retain and attract talent in this environment, right? How will you create a purpose and a meaning when people really work in this environment? I'm sure health and well-being is the key consideration that most of us take place of. Then the other key thing from an organization standpoint is, how do we bring in innovation? How do we bring in culture? How do we collaborate? What are the work preferences? How do we have an inclusive and a diverse workforce, in this environment? What is our operational resiliency? What is the environmental performance? Is it a safe and a trusted workplace, right? So establishing that trust, health, right? And the bottom line is, how is our financial performance? All of these matters, right? So I just listed out these rather than the pros and cons. So though it's easy to understand, though it's easy said than done, I think organizations will really need to step back, understand their work architecture, their workforce, and their workplace, and integrate all this together, right? Because though it seems pretty straightforward, but I think there's a lot of thinking that needs to go in what it means to each organization, because this is not one size fits all. It's all about, what do you need from an organization standpoint? How is your work broken? Is there a remote working capability, right? Is there a remote worker persona, right? You need to really understand the personas of employees, right? Who is remote, who can work on a hybrid, who can probably just come in one day a week. So there's a lot of things that are there, and it's a long conversation, but I would just stop here and tell organizations really need to work along with their policies, their tech ability, and the workplace, integrate all of this together to what we call, or what we are saying as the hybrid model. And it'll be, each organization will have to, fit themselves into what they need.
Sure. Thanks, Praveen. Shamsher, so you have extensive experience in corporate real estate. Currently, your review is all of APAC, right? So what is the CRE trend that you're witnessing in APAC, and how different is it from India? And do you think hybrid work models will be a viable option in the long term?
Okay, I like the way Samir started. Start with a disclaimer. The views expressed are completely mine or gathered with brainstorming by the peers in the industry. So it doesn't represent an organization view, or it may not be only restricting to what we as real estate in MasterCard, I think. So it's just an industry-based experience. See, the major thing is whether hybrid model is here for long or short term. I know Samir covered it, Praveen covered it, and Viral covered it from real estate point of view. I will just take a few steps to also say at least for the midterm to a short term, this will also be guided by local regulations. Okay, organizations will be forced to adhere to this hybrid model because the government does not want more than 50% footfall in the offices, or they do not want 30% footfall in it. So that is one regulatory requirement. As an organization or as an industry, it is definitely acceptable model and a viable model going forward. People have, had it just this COVID been there for 3 to 6 months, possibly the bounce back to the previous normal or pre-COVID situation would have been much faster. Now, I think they have tasted the benefits, I would say, quote unquote, on how you can improve your businesses, how can you optimize your real estate spaces, how can you have a better work-life balance, how can you be more adaptable to technology. Like Praveen mentioned, we all been thinking about it for the last 5, 7, 8 years, whether it was agile working or it was hot desking. The thoughts were there, right? It definitely accelerated it and it helped, and there's a positive out of it. So it is definitely going to be there. That's our thought. The trends which we are seeing, and I'm saying it's not only Singapore, APAC, or with interaction with global level, is that offices are opening up, but employee footfall is not. It is still staying to the minimal. That is leading to the lot of brainstorming happening at business level, happening at human resource level, and happening at our real estate level. That how can we get people back to office? That's one thought process which is trending these days. From the real estate leaders' point of view, I think a lot of collaboration and a lot of integration, whether it is formal, informal, is happening, and there may be various verticals which may be there in our corporates. HSE, which is health safety, HR policies, corporate security, and business resilience. And that is getting merged along with real estate, and a lot of plays coming into us as leaders. How can we be the main team? How can we be collaborating and enabling all these other functions or sub-functions which normally are dormant but have been very active in last 8-10 months and in contributing to how we can come back to the office. So this is my thought in terms of it. Why hybrid will be more successful and why more adaptive would be because business will make the changes. The functions will choose when to come, how to come. It does not mean that you have to be 50% of your time in office and 50% at home. It can be depending on the nature of the work, nature of the organization. It can be 1 day in a week. It can be 3 days in a week at home or in the office. That's my thought, Amit. Back to you, please.
Thanks, Shamsher. Neeraj, so you worked with large IT organizations such as IBM and Usha Martin and have been involved in many workplace strategies adopted by these large multinationals over the years. In your view, what will be the key challenges for companies looking at adopting the hybrid work model?
Thank you. Very pertinent question, I should say. See, what would happen or what's happening at this point and what organizations are grappling with, I would not say that everyone has come to terms with this reality. So if we look back, whether individuals or organizations were used to certain way of working and certain things were taken for granted. Very simple. Access to information, for example. This, my usual way of working, I know where what is available and I have easy access, whether it's digital or printed, whichever format it might be. And that was something which is taken for granted, that I have information available to me at my at my convenience, and a lot of decisions or decision-making process is dependent on this. This is one aspect. I'll try and put it together towards the end. So information is one. Communication, whether face-to-face or otherwise, we were used to a certain way of communicating within the organization, outside the organization, customers, peers, business partners, etc. That is changing. We have to be mindful of the fact, and organizations will have to evolve and create mechanism in how information can be easily provided even today, and similarly how easy the communication, or how can we facilitate communication between various stakeholders. When we talk of these two, and the moment we move out of the confined space which we were in earlier, then both these areas, security becomes important. How secure is the communication, and how secure is the access to information? Hence, security and infrastructure, both would lead to this aspect. So the organization's preparedness in terms of these parameters would define how fast are they able to adapt to the hybrid culture. That's one side. The other aspect is the employee. The employee was used to working in a certain way. We used to talk about you want to put it. There is a sense of, or there is a risk of employee fatigue setting in. We had finite work hours. Beyond that, you had some time, you go back home, you are visiting friends, whatever. I mean, you had a life beyond office. The current, environment, that, the difference between your personal space and office space, or the professional space, has reduced or is blurred. Let's put it that way. That can cause certain amount of fatigue within, within people, as to how far is this sustainable, and how practical it is over a long period. Short term is understandable. So this is another aspect organizations will have to be mindful about. Lastly, I would say there are many other factors, but what came to my mind, the most important ones, is the last point I want to mention is the business, or more important, the organizational culture. All organizations were proud of their own culture. How do you imbibe that culture within each employee? That becomes a bit of a challenge in the current situation, circumstance. How do you adapt? How do you, continue with the same, how should I say, dissemination of the culture, which we were very proud of? So in my opinion, these factors, how best an organization adapts or how fast they adapt, would define as to how successful, this model is going to either work or evolve in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Neeraj. All great points from the panelists. Moving to my second section, is the new office more employee-centric, and will it positively impact the organizational culture? The new office obviously comes from a new set of expectations from employees. Shamsher mentioned that offices are open, employees are not back, organizations are working how to bring them back. Viral mentioned workforce, and workplace integration. That's the key. Neeraj mentioned about personal space and office space getting blurred, right? At the center of all discussions are our employees, for which obviously the workplaces exist, and to make them productive and to promote the organizational culture. So let me start with you, Praveen. Globally, what are the key changes that you have witnessed being adopted by organizations in their quest to make workplaces more appealing to the employees?
Okay, let me answer this in a different way. Sorry, this poll has popped up. One sec. So the point is, we have to start identifying and finding and driving the purpose, right, which will be a key priority for most of the organization in the new world of work. And the workforce will have a high influence in deciding the new future of work scenarios, right? With the work-centric focus, companies will really need to rethink how they shape work patterns, which is a key point, right? Because They've never thought of how do they shape the work itself, which I think is going to be an interesting one when a lot of organization, especially product organization, I'm sure product, insurance, and also I think they're working on this. While new ways of working will need to be adapted and reinvestment to satisfy employee preferences, the fundamental will be, as I mentioned previously, will be the technology. Technology will be a dominant enabler for this solution that will enhance the performance and productivity both for workers as well as the workplace. The reason for a return to the workplace are no longer driven mainly by performance, but also for the fact that we need to bring in stronger human and social concerns or social interactions at the center of everything that we do, right? The future of work will evolve, which will prioritize health and well-being and mental well-being of employees, which I think was the key during the last 12 months. At the same time, the future of workplace will be anywhere at any time, with traditional offices acting as more like a cultural hub, as I mentioned, or a central hub for productivity, social interaction, collaboration, innovation, and more importantly, which will display the culture of the organization. So some of the considerations, I would say, right, which needs to be taken into account as we tread towards this is, from a company standpoint, is about the digital transformation of the business, right, which underpins everything else that we do, right? How do we prioritize human health, well-being, and wellness, right? And COVID is hit the transformation button and it's accelerating, so there's no way you can think back, right? And we have to start building this out from now to next 5 years, right? We have to really think out. More importantly is about how do you really evolve, as I mentioned, about the HR or the benefit policies, their work structure, as I mentioned earlier, which things like mobility programs, work from anywhere, benefits, all of that needs to be really considered, right, to make a successful hybrid policies. Which then from a corporate real estate standpoint, it's all about how do we really restructure our real estate portfolio, with both having liquid footprint to meet the dispersed needs of the workforce, as well as static footprint as well, right? And then I think the key consideration corporate real estate needs to take is, what is the workplace technology transformation we are doing in such an environment, which is very, very essential for us to be successful. So these are some of the consideration, I would say, Amit, that organizations really need to look into. I'm sure a lot of them are already started looking into these areas, which will make them capable enough to deal with this flux at the moment.
Thanks, Praveen. So Samsher, what are the key transformations that are being undertaken by your organization to reinforce employee centricity within the workplace? And I do understand some of it is just not, MasterCard oriented, but obviously your industry opinion. So
yeah,
disclaimer out there. Yeah.
no, I understand that. I think taking it further from what Praveen was mentioning, I think HR policies, when you're looking at transformation, not only real estate related transformation, HR policies are changing. You're trying to bring in well-being, health, post office hours. It's not nothing to do now that, okay, you're 7 to 5 year in office, you get covered. Now, if you have stress or depression or any other mental health or well-being, that is being supported and being looked at. Earlier, the main thing used to be, if I can't see you, I can't manage you, right? That was a major way of looking at it. That is changing. And the positivity of that is that the trust is increasing. Instead of earlier being, okay, if I see you, if you're with me, then only I believe you. Let me see how you're doing it. But with that, now it is moving towards outcome-based focus, not being, you're doing it from where. At times when we say, work is something you do, not where you go, right? So irrespective where you are, you're working around it. So that adaptability is coming up in a very, very big way. From CRE perspective, I think, we're looking at, a lot of touchless interfaces. whether it be temperature monitoring, door operations, coffee dispensing, wherever we can do it, we're adapting it. Otherwise, we're bringing in those microbial films or coatings so that, it's still healthy. HVAC is being looked at from your ionization filters or your, more filters which are coming up. Elevators or access to the buildings are being reevaluated with, proximity sensors and access with your access card. The swipe senses which floor you're going to go, so you don't have to touch the buttons in the elevators at all. Those are things we're looking at. In the leases, when Viral was mentioning somewhere, I think we're looking at optionalities more than we focused earlier, more flexibility into that. I should be able to look at it. The lock-ins, long lock-ins, I think would be a very thought through decision unless you're pumping in millions of dollars into your own leases or own buildings. You'll be looking at what the duration of those things are going to be. So this is my thought. A lot of technology like seat booking applications. I think when you're talking about coming into the office, so how do we bring in that hybrid model, right? And with optimization. So I think we need to invest in, okay, I can book my seat when I come. I can book it for a week. I can book for a day. That kind of confirmation of reservation and technology interfaces also being discussed and invested in.
Great. Thank you, Shamsher. So Samir, clearly work from home has created a imbalance, right? More towards work than life. Do you think that the hybrid model will help employees achieve a healthier work-life balance?
I think a popular notion, definitely, Amit, a popular notion. Shamsher just mentioned that, work timings are getting blurred, right? I think that answers everything. That answers everything. And so I think I'll go to the question specifically. So Amit, it's all about self-discipline. I will start from there. And to answer that, will it have work-life balance? I think the answer is yes and no. So perhaps I'll give both the aspects and then I'll quantify what I think, right? So I think yes, from the fact that I think employees can display higher commitments. The productivity levels are higher. uh, they can create more times for themselves, so they have got more times for themselves. The workplace wherein they used to commute, I think they were spending time, they're saving on that time. They are working in a place, whether it is home, they could create an ergonomic workplace for themselves, or in hybrid model, tier 2, tier 3 cities, whatever the organizations decide, that could be ergonomic for them, because lesser amount of travel, etc., which is there. They definitely can get more time to exercise, take care of their well-being, etc. They can give more time to family, which relaxes them, lowers the kind of stress, more time for community, uh, better environment, right? Overall, if the commute is going to be lesser, I think somewhere or the other we're going to contribute lesser towards polluting this planet, right? And definitely that gives a better environment. The the answer is no, from the perspective that when you are expected to be working long hours, competition is going to go higher and higher. uh, there is going to be higher attrition, because the team bonding, the team connect, the organizational culture that we hear from the leaders is actually going down, right? So team bonding, definitely a big question mark. So I think if you look at it, you have got both pros and cons, but I strongly believe that if at all self discipline is emphasized in the right manner, the organizations are focusing in the right direction, the answer to a healthier work life balance or a better work life balance definitely lies uh, in the hybrid model.
Great. Thank you, Samir. Neeraj, so what according to you will be the key parameters in determining employee productivity and engagement under this new workplace arrangement?
Well, in this particular case, I mean, it is not that these are completely new, parameters, or something which has come in or of late. All these aspects as to what becomes important in terms of how do you measure the the overall performance. These have been there, but certain aspects, or certain maybe I would say the implementation of how it has been done will become important. So in fact, Shamsher was mentioning about result oriented. So that is what it will become. So we are moving from efficiency to productivity. It is not possible or nor desirable maybe. And there was a question of discipline which was mentioned a while ago. So from an employee perspective, a certain amount of discipline will be important. How does that come is a point of discussion. We, whether small or large organizations, where there are always roles, responsibilities, KPIs, these will become very important now, and clear cut roles and responsibilities and associated KPIs, definition as well as tracking and implementation, all three, because there is no way out. If we are really to measure, and the discipline part of it built in, a trust factor, from an employee perspective, it is the discipline. From the management or the organization perspective, it is the trust and facilitation. As long as the trust factor and the facilitation are working hand in hand, then you kind of eventually you will have to leave it to the employee, the discipline part of it and the productivity part of it. And obviously there are tools, there are various tools available in the market in terms of, well, I'm just kind of mentioning attendance or timesheet, productivity tracking, the whole lot. And every day you come across a new one which is coming in. So from a employee perspective, discipline, I'll just repeat. From an organization perspective, the role will become more of a facilitator, and a trust level has to be built in, and clear cut roles, responsibilities, KPIs defined, processes streamlined, put in place, and work towards a result oriented culture. That, in my opinion, would define, or how things would evolve in the coming days.
Great. Thank you, Neeraj. Viral, with remote working becoming the norm, how can organizations reestablish connection and care between distributed teams?
So again, Amit, with my limited experience on real estate, I'll try to answer this from a real estate standpoint. All the leaders are, giving a wider viewpoint on this. The immediate, as I explained earlier, most organizations or all of us today are in the experimentation stroke evaluation stage. There are no long-term plans. There is no 5 year, 10 years. It's a 1 year, 2 year thing because you have only limited visibility. What are the key challenges that companies want today? How can employees come back to work? And as one of the panelists mentioned, it will be driven by the function. Now, if it is driven by the function, what you want also is what is established in the short to medium term is expansion does not mean adding more real estate in the short to medium term. So, your real estate footprint was hinged on rent, and then volume led to expansion, led to volume. I think what will get replaced is volume by quality. And as Shamsher mentioned, or as Praveen mentioned, the enablers would be technology to enhance quality in your workspace, to get back employees. As Shamsher mentioned, other tools which are within the office, touchless contact points, etc., etc. So volume is getting replaced by quality. And when volume is getting replaced by quality, quality comes at a price. So it comes at a higher value. So I think what employers are looking at is their greatest challenges, as some of the panelists have already mentioned, is social capital, culture, and office, at least for some time, will become a meeting point than a working point. So you want to create an environment where the office becomes the point where people come, whether 5 days, 3 days, 2 days, 1 day, over a period of next 1, 12, 18 months. It is driven by quality, then by volume, and you have all of the enablers which make it happen in the interest of the organization. because the trade-off for the organization is multifold. And as Praveen somewhere mentioned, the employee always dictated what has to be it, and to be able to manage, maintain, and hire new talent, you will move towards quality.
Great, Viral. I think all great views from all the panelists. I heard discipline is key, flexibility, as Viral said. Clearly, quality over volume is going to be a key, and efficiency converted to productivity. So I think all great points by all the panelists. Let me move on to the third and the final section. So obviously, everybody is fatigued. We are looking at obviously reopening strategies that we need to adopt for bringing workers or our employees back to work. According to a recent Accenture report, the pandemic has forced the fastest reallocation of labor since World War II. Reopening of offices and returning of workforce will be full of challenges ranging from organizational readiness to employees' confidence in workplace safety. The return to workplace will not happen overnight, and in fact requires a methodical approach that not only addresses key employee concerns, but also gives them reassurance of safety and added value in returning. So let me start with you, Shamsher. Several recent surveys and studies have showcased that the productivity of workforce is declining in the work from home scenario. But at the same time, they are hesitant to return to work. Confidence in employees that will help them return to the physical workplace. Shamsher, you are on mute.
That's the biggest challenge which we all are facing as an organization. How do we get them back? And like you mentioned, Goldman Sachs. I know long time back, and they've been, they're always a counter view they always had for this. They did some surveys long time back and realized that Mondays and Fridays are the least productive days for that organization, because people choose to take it easy to start the work on a Monday, and they take it pretty quick to start the weekend before the Friday starts. So that is a challenge. We all have it. And traditionally, what we used to think about offices was these were the things where you used to get people, right? We used to have cafeteria, we used to have gym, we used to have health club. We're always trying to create spaces to keep and retain offices, the employees in the offices. I think somewhere that has to change now. We'll have to look at what are those amenities which we're going to need going forward, because health is a concern. So possibly now a doctor's room will take a more priority than a TT table. So let's see how will that work around. And with vaccines being, everybody's trying to fight for it. So I think I'm perceiving a lot of vaccine lobbying will happen with corporates, so that you're coming to the office, we are having the vaccinations with doctors or nurses there to provide the vaccination. So that would be one pull and push which you may try, and it may not be mandatory, right? Because nowhere it's mandatory, but yes, that will help in increasing the herd immunity somewhere, will bring in. Traditionally, when we used to look at organization culture, technology and the physical space, that used to be the right mix, right? In terms of how we give a seamless experience of an organization. That used to be the main fiber. I need to really now relook at how we balance that, because all these three pillars will stay, but which role will one of them will play is to be adjusted and relooked at. I think we as humans, we like to socialize, right? And that is the key that we need to build upon. We need to encourage that. That can be encouraged by providing flexibility, but providing a welcome environment in the office, giving them assurance and comfort that hygiene is not being compromised. You are safe when you come to the office. We are doing everything which we can do to provide that there. Better technology, like we talked about it, well-being, provide all health support which you can. Organizations are going and providing, COVID-specific holidays. It can be if you are impacted, or you are a caregiver to somebody who's impacted in your family. So that is over and above the normal holiday or a vacation or a leave you're entitled for. So these are something which will be there to get people and resources back to the office and not think, okay, if they come to the office, it can cause them harm, if they're unsafe, or it's going to, lead to something disruptive. That's my thought, Amit.
Great. Thanks, Shamsher. So Neeraj, the challenges that are there in reopening offices vary across industries. What, according to you, are the major hurdles of reopening offices, and how can these be contained?
Yeah, again, a good question, and very relevant at this point of time. So, there are two aspects to it broadly. One is, of course, the regulatory side of it, where it depends on whether within a state or a city you are actually allowed to open or operate, either fully, partially. So that's one side of it. That obviously one has to go by the law of the land, or what is being decided by the various governments. So I'm not commenting. I'm leaving that aside. Now, coming back to, let us say, whatever is within the means of the organization, then, the first and foremost, in fact, informally, we were touching upon this point before, as a group. So if you just break it down very simple steps, for a person to come to office, what is the first step? Is the commute. So how easy or can I help as an organization in making the commute safer? First aspect, if this is taken care to a certain extent, it would help the employee step out. Second important aspect, and there are many actually, I'm just touching upon the top 2-3. Second is the office space or environment itself. Now, I'm not talking about the physical space here. I'm talking about more of from the environmental aspect, whether the employee perceives, perception is important, perceives the place to be worth going in without, any kind of inhibition, fear, etc., and, performing one's duties. So it's the environment which is going to play a role, how safe and secure it is. Here, two aspects are important: perception and empathy from an organization perspective. One has to, show certain amount of, how should I say, that the organization cares about you as an employee. And hence, these aspects are taken care of. Then would come, how should I say, the various, support mechanism or facilities, which we touched upon. Some of the panelists, did talk about it. The overall support mechanism and facilities provided within the organization or by the organization this is going beyond the environment. Now we are coming to the physical space, in making the employee comfortable in stepping out and coming over. So in my opinion, these would be the major factors which will, in this entire, I should say, the perception will play a very important role. And that is, the onus is on the organization to make the employee feel, secure and cared for. If we are able to crack this, I think to a great extent, this can be solved.
Thanks, Neeraj. Viral, obviously, you're working with the largest occupiers as they're transforming their workplace strategy. And as you mentioned earlier, it's evolving, right? So it's clearly not there, but people are learning through it. So what are some of the trends that you are witnessing that the occupiers are adopting as they're reopening their spaces?
So I'll try to go back a little and look at the overall landscape of the commercial real estate market, and what occupiers are sort of enjoying and how their businesses are shaping up, and hence how commercial real estate is looking like. If you look at the last 10-12 years, say after GFC, the dollar to the rupee traded at $45. Today, the dollar to the rupee trades at 75 rupees. The weighted average rent in 2009-10 across the country was about $45. Today, the weighted average rent is about 75-80 rupees. So in that sense, over a decade, occupiers are paying $1 rent. What has changed in the last 10-12 years? The ownership has become more institutional. The quality of buildings has enhanced. Amenities have enhanced, right? So at the same cost, you are from a real estate standpoint, occupiers are enjoying better amenities, better buildings, etc. Plus, now you have flexible offices being offered by yourselves, which is another dimension to the occupier, right? Um, at the same time, if you look at the Indian commercial real estate market, it is hinged on two sort of variables. One is the international business, the technology-led business, which comes from the West, and the other is the India-facing business. If you look at the technology-led business, when the markets in the West do well, uh, organizations spend on technology, and hence business comes into India, right? When there are cost pressures in the West, again business comes into India from a cost standpoint. So we are office market is very insulated in that sense, and hence occupiers tend to grow. The Indian economy, post COVID, and good for all of us. Most organizations are hiring, is doing well as well. So it's come back in a very strong way. Residential and automobile sales are precursor to what's happening in the Indian economy. So in that sense, that is also doing very well. If I go back to the technology business, ITES, the work that was happening in India 10 years back was more the back end work. Now we've gone up in the value chain in the kind of work that we are doing, more skilled based work. All of this put together, the way we see as how companies are looking at it, I think the key question is, uh, most companies are onboarding, most companies are hiring. All of us on the panel can confirm, that most companies are doing reasonably okay. It didn't look like as bad it was in April 2020, where we are standing today. I think from a 12-18 month standpoint, it is going to be a market where demand will have a far higher weight versus supply, and companies will try and evolve, and the landlord market and yourself will support companies to make it flexible as they evolve into a final model of what is most suitable. I think their primary concerns are talent, hiring, retaining, and the flight to quality. I think is the key thing that we are seeing. But fundamentally, great going. I mean, we have all the REITs that have done very well.
Fingers crossed for that, Viral. I think we continue the recovery. So, Sameer, what changes has your organization made in terms of design, technology, any SOPs that have been incorporated to ensure safe return to work for your employees?
Okay, so again, I would give an industry view, nothing
Sure.
specific. So from an industry standpoint, I think organization, the leaders have been working extremely hard. So perhaps I'll quickly first I'll talk about the tactical stuff, which is like SOPs, which have been while we are using the current spaces. What are the gradual changes which have been done in terms of SOPs, right? I think these are the three major pillars which everyone harps upon, and which is around social distancing, uh, mask, and sanitization. So I think all three aspects in terms of social distancing, I think a lot of work has been done in almost all the organizations. The signages have been placed in, awareness drives have been created, videos have been created, presentations have been created, layouts have been marked, etc., etc. Multiple things done by various organizations looking at their need. The second part around the mask, I think majority of the organization, they have mandated folks to be wearing the mask as soon as they enter the office cab or in the office. I think that's what is a mandate, which effectively translates to reducing 85% reduction in terms of the infection being spread by individuals, right? That's some statistics, and I think that's healthily adopted now. In terms of the sanitization practices, I think there is a huge amount of emphasis on every couple of hours, every hour, every weekend, fumigation, adoption of new products, new services, HVAC, you name it, and it's almost every domain these SOPs have been adopted. There are a lot of innovation. Uh, there are multiple products which have already which are already there in the market, and which are being heavily adopted in today's scenario. Now I'll quickly talk about the second part in terms of technology. I think organizations, they're primarily focusing on contactless, going contactless, uh, as Shamsher was mentioning, also around some proximity based solutions. uh, there would be, and going ahead, and there is currently the need of IoT based solutions which is coming in the forefront. There are solutions which are coming forward which complement the productivity of the individual. There are solutions which will enable colleagues to work on the go. If they have to hop into the office, they could book spaces, etc., etc. I think those are the kind of solutions. There are better tools which are being accessed, or they are being looked at by the IT organizations of various IT organizations within the large corporations, which are helping people to work from home more effectively. I think one of the big areas as far as India is concerned is around compliances, right? Organizations are definitely worried about infosec. So whatever solution that can give sort of comfort to the end clients and to the organization, that in terms of infosec they are doing whatever they can to prevent the misuse of the information they are trying to come out with it. And the third part, which is more a strategic part, which is in terms of design, I think organizations have started re-looking at the design, redeploying a lot of things. Smart offices will definitely be the way of future. There will be agile workspaces, there will be a lot of contribution where people like you, organizations like you, are going to help people scale up, scale down. I think the flexibility that co-working players are going to play, it'll be huge. There will be more collaborative spaces within the new normal, lesser number of seats, and also, since there could be various models which may be adopted by organization. It could be rotational work from home. It may be offices in smaller cities, larger cities, blend, etc., etc. They could be there. So what they are also looking at is to design in it in such a way that the organizational values are reiterated when the people are there within that time frame that they are in the office. There is going to be a lot of emphasis on how they can enhance the team bonding. So I think these are a few of the things which you would find, obviously, without going into further detail, a lot of new technology solution and wellness related activities are also going to be a part of the entire design element per se.
Thanks, Samir. Thank you. So we are almost at the top of the hour, but Praveen, my last question is to you. How can companies emerge stronger with and more sustainable return to office strategies, both in the short and the long term?
Okay, thanks for the last question. I'll try to make it short. Right, I think it's top of the hour. See, I think pretty much, I think first thing is we figured out how to manage the physical workplace, right? I think as Samir, Samsher, and all the colleagues talked about. So that part is taken care about of the how we manage the physical part of the workspace. And I think we've tasted some of this as when the pandemic hit. Initially, when the pandemic hit, about trying to identify what are critical resources that really need to be in the office, right? I think with that critical resources, which I think there were different percentages or different strategies used by companies to identify what are critical resources and why they need to be in the office, right? Now, I think while that is set stage for most of them, right, and they figured out how the physical space needs to be operated. I think the next big thing is for them is how to your specific question, and how do we ensure that everybody returns back to office, right? I think the point here is with the fundamental shift that has occurred, right? I think there are a couple of things that organizations really need to think through. One is identify the personas of employees, right? with the personas of employees, you then map it to, you know, what it means from a job description standpoint. Do they really need to be in the office every single day, right? Or do they need to be probably 2-3 days, right? Or they can be completely called remote workers, right? So that evaluation internally needs to happen based on the type of work an employee does, of how you identify and categorize them in which category, right? I mean, I just mentioned a couple, you can always elaborate it based on the needs. So unless you identify that, you can't talk about what, I mean, the 10%, the 20%, 30% is all fine, right? But when you start increasing that beyond further, right? What is to your specific point, how is that we're going to, and who's that who's going to come to the office? So unless you categorize your employees based on the personas, based on the activities that they do, based on the impact of what they're doing, right, and the impact of what it means for the work structure itself, right, that a particular organization is doing, right, after identification of that, then you start putting them in different buckets, and you know, you can then start working towards not only you know, bringing them back to office, but also trying to evaluate this to the point about the fundamental underpinning whole seminar that we are having of hybrid model, right? Until then, you know, it's going to be very difficult for anybody to tell why he should be or why he should not be there in the office. So that's how I think that, you know, we need to identify the personas, we need to really understand why they should be in the office, what's the benefit of them being in the office from a standpoint of productivity that is needed, and why can't he not be operating from home. Underpinned with that is all about how is your I would say, I wouldn't call it HR, but benefits and all that associated for an employee to entice him not only to work from office, but also entice him to, you know, work from home. So, you know, it's a long drawn, challenge, which I think a lot of organizations are really evaluating and thinking, right? It's easy up to, you know, 30, 40, even 50% of your workforce, but beyond that, why do you need somebody in the office is a fundamental question. I think a lot of them are thinking for themselves based on their business strategy. When I mean business strategy, based on their digital strategy, because unless the digital transformation is not happened, then it's going to be always challenging, whether it's your infosec or the capability of your technology and tools for them to be productive. All that is fine. So my point is, hey, unless we know what is the personas, why he should be in the office after a certain percentage of employees coming in, it's going to be very difficult, and companies really need to start working through it. It's just not the companies, but I think within the company, it's all about the functions who really need to evaluate this. The key functional leaders need to think this in a little more depth and put their own strategy for each function. It's not that, hey, an X function will work like this and a Y function. It's going to be different even for a customer success organization, different for a development organization, different for a technology organization. So it's going to be very different for each of them. It's just that, you know, each of them need to reflect onto what they do and then, you know, prepare this out. Hope that gives some insights, Amit.
No, it did. Thank you, Praveen. Over to you, Sumit, for some Q&A, as I see some questions have already popped up.
Right. Thank you, everyone. It's been a very insightful session. So there are a couple of interesting questions. We'll try to take up two at least. So first one is from Kiran Guru. It says, in a hybrid model, the biggest challenge with organizations is to retain their cultural integrity. What are your thoughts on this topic, and how can organizations lead this change while keeping their employees culturally integrated? May I request Shamsher if you would want to take a stab at this one?
Sure, Sumit. I think we briefly touched base on it, that culture is one of those pillars which binds all of us. And then office or physical spaces were the key contributor to the culture. You have brand, once you walk in, you associate yourself with the aura and the awe of an office. And then once you're inside, then your values and all those things are demonstrated by the leaders, by the mentors. When the new joinees come across, there's a whole process of onboarding a person. and then you make them run through what is required, how it is being done from HR handholding to the respective function, and then there used to be always an introduction. You move around, go around. There's always onboarding process which is there. I think a lot of that has moved to digital. Here I can say in my organization, there have been a lot of onboarding. Like I think Amit mentioned somewhere in one of the conversations that onboarding has continued, right? People have been hiring, and that goes for most of our organizations. So that has moved to a digital platform. We try to do it on the basis of digital, but how do we ensure in a hybrid model? I think if you're going to make them more collaborative spaces, possibly we can have a few days in a month fixed up for onboarding, new joiners coming in, intermingling depending on how many people or what percentage of people is allowed as per regulation. So the leaders can come there. So it can become, even if it's a hybrid model, office spaces can be there for knowledge sharing, interaction, introduction. So that can evolve as that. That's my short answer, and I'll leave it to others to answer that, please.
Thank you, Shamsher. That's helpful, and I think it's a very, very complex situation which every organization is going to face to maintain that cultural integrity. My second question is around how will companies measure performance and productivity in a hybrid work model with some people work from home and other working from an office? So any pure play performance measurement and productivity measurement tools. So Neeraj, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, in fact, it's a important question, very important and pertinent. And in fact, we touched upon it in the earlier part of the conversation. Look, and I'll kind of repeat. R&R roles, responsibilities, and KPIs will be important in terms of definition, implementation, both. How do you define, how do you implement, and how do you measure? But most important is the result. Hence, whether you're working from home or you're working from office, employee will be more and more judged on the result he or she is producing, irrespective of where the person is working from. So I think the culture, we talked about efficiency to productivity and productivity to result. That's the cycle or the path will be adapted by most of the organizations. And the moment you talk about result, then it doesn't matter where you are. You are judged by the same yardstick.
Yeah.
See, just adding on to Neeraj, I think the fundamental crux of this is outcome based, right? Because now you're working on teams, you're not individual based, right? If you look at everything that has changed, it's more team outcomes rather than individual outcomes. Yeah, I mean, it is important, but at the end of the day, there are different tools that different organizations use to measure the productivity. But I think the fundamental crux of it is, hey, what's the outcome of a particular team when they're really working on something, right? So that's very easy to measure. But the important layer that sits above all of this is trust and collaboration, right? It's not always somebody policing you for what you have to do. It's about the trust and collaborative environment that you really create, right? So that's where I think the philosophy should lie on, not just monitoring you for every day, every hour on what your productivity outcomes are, right? So that's just my view on how I look at things. Sumit.
Sure. Thanks, Praveen. Thanks, Neeraj, about it. I think this was today's Q&A. We can't have more questions because of the paucity of time. Over to you, Amit.
Thanks, Sumit. So it's been a fantastic 60 minutes with each of you. I personally have learned a lot and hope the participants have as well. Thank you all the participants to make this a success and our panel for sharing their views candidly. With current traction on vaccination and reducing caseload, we all hope India Inc. can get back to the new hybrid workplace in the new normal. So stay safe and stay happy. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Amit.
thanks everybody.
Thank you,
Bye.
Sumit.
Thank you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Thank you.